And now I'll introduce Danielle Flood. Um, she lives in Florida, as you just heard, and Meyer Beach, which I'm glad you're okay.
Thank you.
She has attended Florida Golf Course University, a native Floridian. She speaks at least 4 languages and is working on a few more. She grows her own herbs and has a small garden and uses that stuff. So she's close to my heart. She is the communications manager at ECHO, ECHO, an international organization that works to find innovative, sustainable ways for small scale farmers worldwide to improve their harvest, reducing global hunger and poverty. She's traveled to more than 20 countries while championing agricultural development through hands-on training and freely sharing what we have learned. Danielle loves kitchen gardens, languages, traveling, and being outside with her husband and 3 adventurous kids. Danielle, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be with you, Garden Club representatives. I will admit I am better in person. I prefer seeing your faces, getting some of that feedback, knowing that we're connecting. So I do encourage you to use the Q&A. If you have questions, we will address those. We'll have some, back and forth during the Q&A time. But I'd love to share with you a little bit about ECHO and a little bit of ways I see that you can use the skills and passions that you have through garden club work, civic organizations, and gardening to ripple effect, make an echo effect around the world. And so thank you for that invitation. It's been a wild ride for sure. I'm from a small town in Florida. We have more cows than people. But through, those circumstances and being led from one thing to another, I found myself in the middle of a village in West Africa, learning Fulfulde enough to make my needs known and living among small scale farmers. So my life has been blessed by seeing some of the most creative farmers in the world and seeing how they have been working to provide for their families for years and sharing that knowledge. And then it's only been multiplied through ECHO. My skills are not much in farming and gardening. That's why I keep my garden small. I have container gardens up into the landscaping. We don't tell the HOA, but if they asked me to move them, I would. And I think one of my greatest joys in gardening right now is to ask my kids to go and clip some of the rosemary or the sage or the basil, and they know what it is. They bring it in, and then we put it right in our meals. And so that's a little bit about me. I'm going to share this presentation, but again, I want you to be thinking about how you could implement some of this in your community. And I'm extremely glad to be able to share it. So here is ECHO. We are a international global nonprofit. We do a lot of work around the world, also here in the United States with community gardens, school gardens, and nonprofits. And our goal is to equip people with knowledge. So if we can equip people with knowledge, people like you and many others will share that and multiply it around the world, helping families to help themselves. And so it's amazing to see the dignity and the joy that comes from, someone who didn't have a lot of hope for their garden or their field. And then they learn a little bit, they put it into practice, and it works. And so that hope is what we're going for. This is younger me. I found myself just out of college, living in Niger, like I said, playing with the kids and the women and children. We pounded millet grain for every day's meal. We pulled water from the well. We planted the millet when it was time. We harvested when it was time. And it was incredible to see the dependence on the land that we had. And then I started thinking, I'm only a generation out of a farming family. Like my dad was living on a farm when he was small in Indiana. It could be that I was born on a farm, but because of a death in the family, his mom and two sisters and himself had to move off the land, and she put all of them through school by being a pianist, by the way. And our family became not farmers. So, just a generation off of the land, there is no way I could farm and provide for ourselves. And we find that all around the world as globalization has led to families thinking that their kids are better off off of the farm. They send them, they get an education, they go into the urban centers and they work to, build a better life. And they find that there's not as much nutrition. Food is expensive, lodgings are hard to find and expensive, and their quality of life is not better. So as we look around the world, ECHO and a lot of the work partners that we have seeks to build that dignity back in the farming profession. It doesn't have to be all, credit and debt. It doesn't have to be large scale to be profitable. There's a lot of dignity in growing the food you need. So I want to share with you the lens that ECHO uses so that you know what's going on around our work. But then I want to show toward the end how we can equip you with some of these resources because you're our backyard. ECHO works globally because that's the niche that we found the most need in. But if there are ways that you can use your skills, maybe as a master gardener, as a volunteer, as a parent, as a grandparent, and you can pour into your kids' school or church garden or community garden, that again is the end goal of equipping people to help themselves and that hope from the ground up. So you've heard me say it already now, ECHO works through equipping. We do that because it's more effective. If you, they say, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, and he eats for a lifetime. And that is so true as we give people steps up in their knowledge, maybe things that are accessible, appropriate to their work, but they just haven't had access to. ECHO equips people with resources that we've learned from land grant institutions, universities around the world, and then sharing it freely in easily accessible ways and multiple languages. We are educators, but not afraid to get our hands dirty. And I think that's an important balance there. ECHO works to show hands-on techniques, ways that people can share easily then afterwards with their communities. There is inherent dignity in being able to do something for yourself. If you think about, we were just talking about the hurricane, relief is needed immediately. There are wonderful organizations working to provide that relief, but if relief goes on long-term, people lose the value of being able to support themselves, and it leads to cycles of, support and others leaning on each other, dependency, and just challenges where people aren't finding that hope in providing for themselves. Agricultural resources multiply. You plant a seed, you don't know how many seeds come out of that one, but also skills. If you can learn how to, harvest a certain crop, process it into food, then it becomes something that you can do over and over again, even if you're forced off your land, even if political climates change. And so we're excited that those can last afterwards. We conduct research here in Fort Myers, Florida, and at our centers around the world so that we can test what we share, validate, and then recommend better options to people. We know that there's not one technique that'll work in even one community. One technique won't cover all of world hunger, but it's these little options for each specific situation that could be the solution to the overall challenge of hunger. So self-sustainable solutions to hunger that are small-scale farmers and gardeners here and around the world. I like to share a story about Alassane because where I lived in Niger was just a neighboring country. So this looks familiar for one, but also Alassane and his wife had diminishing returns. They knew how to farm and garden. They had land that they inherited from their family, but every year it got more difficult to provide for their needs. In West Africa, the Sahel region runs just below the Sahara Desert, but not too far down to the tropical, rainy areas. So they call it the Sahel, and they get 20 to 60 inches of rain per year. And that comes mostly in about 3.5 months of the year. When I lived there, they told me it wouldn't rain for 8 months. And I thought for sure they were pretending or joking with me, or maybe even mistaken, because I was, 20 at the time. Who believes what they're told? But the climate there was such that their one rainy season was all that they had to provide for their family. So this limited rainy season, overworked soil, year after year cultivation, no wonder their crop wasn't working very well. But Alassane didn't have a lot of resources to diversify. And one failed crop meant his income was ruined for the year. So of course he wasn't experimenting with different things. He and his wife talked about leaving their area. They heard that land down south was more fertile, and it would be easier to harvest. But through a partner organization, ECHO was invited to come in and do agricultural training. In West Africa, in this climate, we teach zyholes, so planting stations in the field that get compost and fertilized during the dry season. It makes the roots be able to permeate the hard packed soil easier. It makes the water permeate those planting stations. And basically you have like a container garden inside of your field. So you're fertilizing and watering that location where your plants are. So the zyhole system is very effective in West Africa for field crops. And Alassane and his wife gave it a try. And later that year, the follow-up trip came back and took this photo and saw the harvest that they received that was 30% more than they had in years past that they could ever remember. And the joy on their faces shows that their sorghum and their millet did very well. They use homemade liquid fertilizer, one of the techniques ECHO teaches, where you gather green leaves, brown waste, manure, water, stir it every day for 21 days, and the nutrients released in that water are then put onto the crops during the growing season. So Alassane and his wife were going from thinking they had to leave their family land to a completely changed harvest. He said, before it was such a small harvest, it was impossible to feed the family year round. And that last couple months before the harvest was always very meager. But now he grows enough to sell part of the crop to get through. He has extra livestock because they're healthier. And then he told the follow-up team that his kids were now going to secondary school instead of just stopping after elementary because he can pay for school fees. And that's all well and good if that was one location, but ECHO works to keep a light footprint so that we can be effective globally. We have centers in Thailand, Tanzania, Burkina Faso, and our headquarters is here in Florida, so that we can be broad, but still have contextualized resources for those who serve people all around the world. It goes from urban centers to the rural areas, highlands in the tropics, down to the lowlands. And it's exciting to be connected to partners across continents, countries. We train in somewhere around 25 different countries every year, making sure people have access to those. Through our online community, People access our website from 190 countries to take those free resources and to share them. And so that's very exciting. Then we have 18,000 network members who are Peace Corps volunteers, missionaries, development workers, partner organizations, or even community leaders here and around the world who want to share what they're learning with ECHO. So I'm going to share a little bit more about ECHO community, but the goal is to have a smattering of resources that reaches all around the globe. Direct training through our impact centers, and then resourcing and equipping. So one example is seeds. If we told people, hey, this crop will do well for you, we know it grows where you are, good luck finding it, but be well and grow some seeds, it wouldn't help them very much. And so one of the things that ECHO started doing more than 40 years ago was equipping people with trial-sized packets of seeds so that they can experiment and see if it does grow well for them, if it is appreciated as a food in their community, and then be able to multiply it. So we do send thousands of packets of seeds every year and, see those multiply in their communities. Our trainings are from, the Asia region, East Africa, West Africa, Latin America, and throughout Florida. So what kind of trainings can we offer? We're going to talk about the different things that you might need, but creative capacity building. How can farmers be useful innovators for their community? What types of trees can we plant to help feed their animals? How to best care for the animals? How to make compost to build the soil? What does the soil need? These kinds of things can, often be easily known to you, but maybe more challenging in a community where resources are scarce. I mentioned homemade liquid fertilizer, how to conserve our environment through agriculture, providing for both animals, people, and that work, and then saving seed, banking seeds for their communities. So your work is probably more local. I can see community gardens and church gardens and school gardens throughout your network, places that you spend your time and your passions connecting with those around you. My question are, why are community gardens so important? And we found that if children can get involved with the growing of their food, then they're much more likely to try it when it's time to eat it. Community gardens build belonging, much like a garden club or a civic organization. Community gardens meet the needs of the local community. ECHO loves to inspire, equip, and support gardens that are serving the poor. So when we look at the different kinds of ways that community gardens can work locally and globally, I want to talk about specific facets of ECHO. So we train in sustainable techniques, whether that's the zero graze you see here on the screen, or ways that a school teacher could help to keep her school garden watered and lasting over a school break, or ways that a church could continually train their volunteers to serve and resource a food bank through their local garden. So anything that can help farmers and gardeners to last sustainable techniques and to share those with their community. ECHO wants to help field gardens to not break down the soil, or for cattle not to overgraze, but to care for the environments around us and make the the natural ecosystem not be a victim of human habitation. We also like to teach appropriate technology. This is an example of a continuous flow biogas digester. We have 2 of them here at the farm in Fort Myers, but the excitement of the biogas digester is that we're taking waste, often it's manure, kitchen scraps, any kind of biological waste. It breaks down, releases methane, And then the methane is collected here in the top center, the gas outlet. And that methane then can run a cook stove. So by using manure, kitchen scraps, water, and ingenuity, a family can harvest clean cooking fuel for their kitchen. Appropriate technology runs the gamut from like an equipment that you can build to help the farming process go easier, faster, more efficiently, to shelters, how to build local either food storage or home sites for families, or post-harvest technologies, how to take the grain from the field, store it, and help it be much more preserved for the food. You can grow all the food that you want, but unless it gets to the market or to a family's plate, it doesn't benefit them. So appropriate technology bridges that gap there. We're seeing nowadays that appropriate technology could be an iPhone app that helps the farmer know the cost of seeds or the cost of goods from their town to the capital city, or what is the weather forecast going to be, when is the best time to harvest, etc. So it can be any type of appropriate technology. We love that for schools. We've seen some really great aquaculture going into high schools, teaching kids how that they can simplify water use and have a harvest of both plants and fish. So, as you know, the benefits of gardening, not just the eating it, but also the action of growing, is a zillionfold, I'll say. It's amazing to be part of growing, receiving seeds, knowing what you're growing, and then being able to put that into your diet. Children in their first 5 years of life around the world are just not getting the resources that they need. From weaning, it's terrible that there's enough food to feed every man, woman, and child, but the division of the food across the world is not fair. And so if we can do something to help mothers not have to choose which children to feed, or to know that our school kids are getting healthy access to food, I think is a win in my book. Like I said, we all want to provide for our families, no matter what our living situation is. So simple technologies, simple solutions are going to be something that you could implement today. And so I want to share the tippy tap that Echo teaches. It's not something that we innovated. We learned it from a creative farmer around the world, but the tippy tap uses a little bit of water, but then provides hand washing access in places where there's no water facilities. So you take any sort of jug. I like to use a, laundry detergent jug, and you put holes in the right spot, tie it on a balance point, and then with the footboard that you see here, you can pull on the balance point, letting the water fall out of the small hole in the side. And so you can refill it as often as you need. But this simple technique can give hand washing facilities in a place where before there were none. This was something that Echo has been teaching for 20 years. And I gave a tour one time, and in another day, the 12-year-old that was on the tour had built one for his family's backyard. But also for places like orphanages or institutional schools that are feeding children without some of those resources, it's amazing to be able to provide a clean hand washing station. Notice the soap hanging on the right side. So the ultimate goal of all of Echo's work is to provide hope. That's hope for single moms in our communities that just don't know where their food's going to come from. Hope for families around the world whose income might be limited or be looking for those minor improvements that will make a huge difference on their livelihood. Seeds that will give a farmer another crop so that they're diversified against drought or pests or something. And the goal is to equip those families both here and around the world. So if I'm talking globally, I want you guys to start thinking about your community and what does poverty look like in your community. So I'm going to go quickly through 8 types of poverty that we have seen that occur even in the wealthiest communities that you might know. So listen quickly. The first type is intellectual poverty. In some of the villages that Echo sees, kids don't have access to a good school. Maybe they have to stay home to help the family, or maybe inner city schools just aren't staffed with what they need, and the kids don't have that potential to reach their own. This is a village that I lived in, and my friend Rabia too. She was a younger daughter, but all of her brothers were older than her, and so she was the one that had to help around the home. They had enough resources to provide for themselves, but there was not a good way for her to be able to get to school. And she saw her friends go to school every day, but knew that that was not something that she would get to do. So poverty of affection. For many people, violence is a way of life. And I've seen this in communities where boys are forced to beg on the streets. And if they don't earn enough, where they come back, they're not welcomed back in where they're supposed to stay. If they don't have the affection that leads to healthy relationships, they live outside of love in either hate or bitterness, low self-esteem, and fighting for everything that they get. So selfishness there. Physical poverty is probably one of the easier ones to see. Hard lives, malnutrition, harsh working conditions, living conditions that no one wants to see others, and no access to healthcare is normal. When I was in Niger, I contracted malaria more than once, but because of my wealth, my situation, I had access to medical care and medicines. It wasn't life-threatening for me, but for many people it is. And so that difference in physical poverty is the change there. This is taken in Guatemala, where families mine the dump for resources to sell. It's a hard life. So many people think about only economic poverty as the only kind of poverty that we see. But you know, people all around the world who live on less than $60 a month. That's incredibly hard for them. There are no options, no access to healthcare. The challenges of just not knowing where your meals are coming from is terrible. If there's no ability for you to improve your situation, economic poverty is the challenge there. But then we might think of some poverty that you haven't thought about before. So civic involvement, the ability to offer leadership or cooperation, collaboration in our community. This is, I think, one of the benefits you guys find in the National Garden Club is being part of the community, having people that recognize you, and then being able to make a difference. In my life, middle school and high school clubs were a huge part of my growth. And volunteering from an early age shows what it means to be greater. And then in my family, I think that sitting around the kitchen table helps our kids realize that they're part of a family and then part of a community. So that's important to me as a mom. I know it's probably important to all of you guys for your families, but also our communities. This is terrible in the United States today, but the support network, building these communities that help parents with their kids or older people, or just the community knowing that you're not alone. The loneliness that is even exacerbated by social media these days, broken families, neighborhoods that don't encourage people to connect, I think are all making this a bigger challenge in our communities. Poverty of the will is challenging, but many people are enslaved to substance abuse, or they are coerced into either human trafficking or gang control, actual slavery in our day to day, or the loss of hope or a poverty mentality. We see people who have been led to dependence for so long that they don't know what it means to provide for themselves, and they lack the will or the encouragement to change. And finally, spiritual poverty, not having anything to believe in that's bigger to themselves. These, all 8 of them, often last from generation to generation, or throughout a community can be more pervasive. So as you're looking around your community, what is it that you could see and help people connect with? I think that's what makes it so exciting to be part of ECHO, is that gardens, fields, community gardens, and the work that we do attacks a lot of these. So it's really cool to be part of that. And ultimately, the goal is for your neighbors, the kids in your corner school, and then people all around the world to go from the struggle of poverty to abundance. And gardening can do that. You know, planting a few seeds can lead to plants that feed you for years. So as we're wrapping up, I want to share a little bit about how ECHO can equip you specifically if there are ways that you see yourself being serving around the world, serving in your community, short-term volunteer work, or just long-term in your own yard and garden, helping to feed your neighbors. ECHO Community is a resource. We have documents by type, by publication, by region, by topic. There's a North America discussion group. And then I'm going to pull up ECHO Community Conversations here, because you can ask a question that serves your community, and not only will ECHO staff reach in and answer, but people from around the world can share their expertise and answer your question. So ECHO Community also has an app. It's made to be super lightweight, low bandwidth, so you can curate the kind of resources that you need and save them to your smartphone of any type, and then share them as accessible when you're in your meeting. So the ECHO Community mobile app is a free resource for you. You can search by your needs. You can search by what you're looking to accomplish. You can search community gardens, or any resources that we have around the world to share. We want them to resource you too, because again, around the world and in our own backyards. So I want to share, we do have a global farm here in Fort Myers, Florida. If you are in the area and want to visit, we have a great tour that's educational and inspiring. I'd love for you to come and visit. But also, if you don't get down to Florida, please take a minute, spread the word. We'd love to have you share with people who are either working in your community about the resources that we have. The goal is to freely share knowledge to grow hope from the ground up. So this will be recorded and shared later, but if you would like to reach out to me, here's my email address. And I'd love to connect you with ECHO resources or people in your area that are doing great work. And then I'm excited to share with you and hear your questions and answers. So thank you so much for having me, and I'll talk to you soon.